Welcome everybody to Hacker Valley Blue, where we get the industry's best and brightest cyber defenders to share their experiences and tips on how you can better defend your assets and networks. This season, I'm gathering some of the very best blue teamers across the field to form my all-star team of defenders who will use their talents against some of the biggest cyber threats that we face today. Join me as I meet with my team, learn about their origins, what drives them, and the pivotal role they play in the world of cyber defense. So without further ado, let's get to it. When it comes to IT and security, we can agree on two things. Complexity is increasing and manual asset inventory approaches no longer cut it. It's time to adapt. And that's where Axonius comes in. Axonius correlates asset data from existing cybersecurity and SaaS solutions to provide an always up-to-date inventory, uncover gaps, and automate action, giving you the confidence to control complexity. Sign up for a free walkthrough of the platform at axonius.com/get-a-tour. That's AXONIUS.com/get-a-tour. What's going on, everybody? Thank you for joining another episode of Hacker Valley Blue. I am your host, Davin Jackson. And if you guys aren't familiar, this season's theme is the Defenders. All season, I have been bringing different people from all over the cyber blue team defense side to build up my team of warriors to go out and just defend from all the cyber threats. And in picking my team, I had to find someone who not only could lead, but could also teach others how to lead. Everybody has to have a great teacher, mentor, sensei, master, whatever it is you want to call them. And I think I found a perfect one. She is the director of intelligence. She has led several teams, and she's also an instructor. So I feel like I hit the jackpot. So everybody watching, please welcome my guest, Katie Nickles. Katie, thank you for joining.
Thanks so much for having me. Awesome to be here, Davin.
Thank you. Like I said, I know you're busy, but I had to have you on my team. But for those who don't know, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So currently I'm director of intelligence at a company called Red Canary. We do security operations, managed detection response across endpoint, cloud, all these other sources. And it's really fun. I get to lead a team in tracking a bunch of different threats and trying to track those threats to help people make better decisions about security, etc. So that is my primary job. When I'm not doing that, I'm an instructor for SANS, as you mentioned. I teach the Cyber Threat Intelligence class, Forensics 578. I also get to do a monthly live stream, which is a lot of fun, sharing different threat information with people in the STAR live stream. I'm also a senior non-resident fellow for the Atlantic Council, which has been kind of a fun addition over the past year, trying to take some of the defender and practitioner perspective and see how I can translate that for policymakers. So yeah, that's a little bit where I am now. I've used to work at Mitre on the Mitre Attack team, which was a lot of fun. That's sort of how I made my transition out of the government contracting world and meeting a lot of private sector folks and realizing how much fun this world is. So it's a little bit about me right now and a little bit about my past.
So again, like I said, thank you for joining. I know you're super busy, but you talked about it briefly with your experience. So could you just talk about how you got started and what led you to go to the blue team, the defense side?
Yeah, absolutely. Originally in my career, I wanted to be a journalist. I interned for CNN. I wanted to do broadcast journalism. And as many of you probably have experienced, sometimes finding a job is hard. And that didn't really work out. So I started out doing kind of entry level research for a private investigative firm and then met my now husband, who was familiar with the intelligence community, and said that, hey, you like to research, you like to write, maybe you'd be interested in intelligence analysis. And I said, cool, I'm happy to give that a try. So I was really lucky, kind of right place, right time. The US Department of Defense was hiring a whole bunch in cybersecurity, basically in cyber threat intelligence. And I showed up to the interview. I had done my research and they said, you seem smart. You don't know cybersecurity or intelligence, but we can teach you. You seem smart enough. So it's really, really fortunate. And I always try to keep that in mind whenever I'm hiring people or encouraging people who are newer to this field. Like if you have the potential and the hunger and capacity to grow and learn, right? I think anyone can be successful in this field. So, yeah, I found when I started it with the DoD that I really liked tracking kind of the human side of adversaries. Right before I got in, I was like, "Oh, it's so boring looking at logs and like bits and bytes and that boring cyber stuff." But I realized it was really more about the humans, right? Okay, there are logs, but there's a human behind the keyboard or behind malware who created that. So I think that's what kind of gave me the passion for wanting to defend, right? We're defending against human threats. And, I know the offensive side is fun and red teaming is fun, but for me, there's no better feeling than right? Knowing what a threat's going to be doing and then like helping defenders stop them. That's really satisfying.
Yeah, that's awesome. I agree with you wholeheartedly on everything. I do believe that we should all kind of give people chances if they have the capacity to learn. Like you said, the human element of putting all those pieces together. Describe what that feeling is like, because I compare it to like popping that shell on a pen test, right? So,
Mm.
is that the same for you? Like, what's that feeling like when you're in an investigation and you put all the pieces together and you're like, I got it. I have the whole timeline.
That's funny. Yeah, I like the on the red team side, like get a shell. On the threat intel side, I think it's when you're able to identify patterns across like different intrusions, different data sets, and then realize what it means. This is something a lot of people, especially when they first start tracking threats or tracking threat groups, don't quite understand. But what I think is that as you start to find those commonalities and patterns, like, hey, we saw 5 intrusions where they did the same thing, right? They renamed a built-in tool to Task Host W, and then they move laterally over SMB or whatever, and then you're like, hey, wait, that's happening here, so I can kind of anticipate what's going to happen next. And when you start to see the patterns and the commonalities, like I think it's kind of like a puzzle, right? And, it's a puzzle that there's no one answer to, but I think it's so much fun when you see the same commonalities and you can start to cluster them together and then realize that helps me understand this threat and ideally, right, inform the defenders, inform what we know and how we react. And I love the clustering piece. It's sometimes frustrating and challenging because you're like, what's specific enough to associate? But fun, unique strings or like passwords from command lines or from compressed RAR files, right? All of those unique human strings and human fingerprints, it's really satisfying when you're like, I know I've seen this before, and you can kind of make that connection. So sounds like the same satisfaction from popping a shell, right? Just a different approach.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I like the analogy of the puzzle, because it's definitely I think that's definitely the feeling I had when I was doing those exercises in that exam. It was just like, again, it's like you're putting the different pieces together, and then
Mhm.
from there you're like, you see the whole picture, and you're like, okay, so on this day this person did this and that, and then they went here, and so I always
It's
thought that
hard
was
work though. That's
it
what a lot
def
of people underestimate. Like doing that, it can be tedious, right? Trying to map out, like we have tools to help us, like with timelines, but I think always there's going to be a human component of that, right? Like as a human, I have to combat human adversaries and trying to put the pieces together. Like it's a lot of work, but it's really satisfying in the end.
it is and like with pen testing, sometimes it takes a lot of time to,
Mhm.
to flesh out that vulnerability and then flesh out that exploit. uh, but for me, it's exciting, right? Because you're like,
Mhm.
I know you have that gut feeling that is like, I know it's there, and I'm
There's
going.
some flaw. I'm going to
Yeah,
find it.
there's something here, and then even when you hone in on one, it might be a rabbit hole, but other times, most times, if you're lucky, it's exactly what you need, and you spend hours, and sometimes you zone in. You might have your music or something playing in the background, and next thing you know, you look up and you've been there for like 4 hours. But but for
Same
me,
thing on our side.
yeah, I was gonna say, but for me, it's kind of exciting. So on your side, what excites you? What keeps you excited? Because like you said, it can be a lot of work, and if your heart isn't in it, you can find yourself burned out and looking for another line of work really quick. So what excites you and keeps you motivated when you're doing what you do?
I think one thing I love about threat intelligence is that the threats are always changing, right? It's always a little bit different. Like, I never really know what I'm going to be finding on a certain day, right? What's going to be coming in? Am I going to have to learn some new technique or some new thing the adversary is doing that I've never seen before? So I think the constantly changing piece is really satisfying and it keeps me interested, right? It's not like you get in the same rut and, boring routine. The other thing that I love about threat intelligence is that I really think that it's a powerful force for making change and informing decisions, right? That's what intelligence is supposed to be all about. And sometimes people lose sight of that. But I think it's really fun to be able to say, like, hey, before we didn't know anything about these threats. Now look at all of this stuff and these insights and findings that we have. And you can inform others, right? And help them make some kind of better decision, right? About their security posture. Oh, we need to remove this built in tool because it's ruining our environment and adversaries are using it, or, right, some kind of improvement. And I find that, right, informing others and helping them do better, I find that to be really satisfying.
Yep, absolutely. And speaking of informing others, you spent some time with the MITRE framework and incorporating your threat intelligence into that attack framework. I understand that was amazing to do, and it was a great thing and a big thing to do, and it was important. But what motivated you to incorporate that? Because I mean, for those who know, the MITRE framework is a series of basically frameworks on how to attack, so to speak. But yeah, to incorporate the cyber threat intelligence aspect to it, like what was your motivations there?
Yeah, I was really another right place, right time kind of thing. Right after Mitre Attack was publicly released around 2015, I had been working in government security operations centers and I was kind of looking for something a little different to do. And one of the creators of Attack, Blake Strum, approached me and said, hey, like, we've started, mapping out different groups to attack, but we really need someone to kind of take that and run with it. And I said, cool, this sounds fun. So, started getting my feet wet, helping out a little bit. And then Attack just kind of took off, right? It was a really fun and exciting time. And it was just cool to be part of, right, what Blake and the team had started and trying to help grow that and help people really understand that, right, Attack, it's a framework of different adversary behaviors, but the framework doesn't do the work for you, right? Like anything, as we talked about, you have to do the work and helping people understand how powerful it was, though. If you start to apply it to what threats are doing, mapping out, okay, here are the techniques I've seen this group use. And from there, I can use that knowledge to tell my defenders we need to collect PowerShell logs because red teamers and adversaries, they love their PowerShell, right?
Yes, we do.
So I think that was what was really fun is, being able to um, kind of build on what folks at MITRE had already started and just kind of get the word out about how this framework can be useful. And I think it's cool to see now because the team's still rocking it over there. And like Attack has become a household name and sort of just like an assumed thing everyone uses, which is really awesome.
No, it is. You're in meetings and they're like, yeah, just look at the attack framework, and
Yeah.
I remember when I first started, I really didn't know what it was, but I kept hearing it in meetings, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna write this down, and
I should probably look into this
yeah, I
thing.
should probably look into it. But yeah, like you said, now it's literally like the go-to. What other things do you do to kind of stay ahead of things? With attacks happening, what seems like every week, and every time you turn around in the news, someone's being breached or there's some attack out there. What do you do, or what do blue teamers do to kind of stay ahead of these attacks? Because just trying to keep up with coming up with the exploits and learning the exploits is overwhelming. So I can only imagine what it's like on the other side trying to defend against all of them.
Yeah, I think one important thing that I try to do, and my team at Red Canary and others should do as well, is partner across different teams, right? So at Red Canary, we have a threat research team. My teammate Matt Graber, so awesome at thinking about like what could an adversary do in the future, right? So whereas myself and my team, we take a look at right what kind of ransomware attacks are happening right now, what techniques are adversaries using, right? Having those researchers offensive researchers, right? Vulnerability researchers, malware researchers, anyone who's kind of taking a deeper look or a forward looking dive into, okay, what are all of the things that a built in binary like Mishta could do, right? We're really focused on, okay, what are we seeing in the wild? But trying to listen to people who do really deep research like that, what are the next things that maybe we're not seeing adversaries do right now, but what are researchers telling us is possible? What are the things that our red teams are doing that maybe we haven't thought about defending? And I think there's a balance there, right? Because as threat intel analysts, we often focus on what the real threats, quote, real, are doing. But sometimes we've seen, right, things that techniques that red teamers adopt, real adversaries or proper villains, as my friend Tony says, will start adopting those soon after. So I think that, right, it's a really challenging mix of tracking what's happening right now, but then also trying to anticipate, being forward looking and listening to the people who are doing that kind of research, I think is really, really important.
Absolutely. Before I go any further, I do have to give a shout out to this season's sponsor, Uptycs. Uptycs provides the first unified cloud native analytics platform that enables both endpoint and cloud security from a common solution to enable security professionals to quickly prioritize, investigate, and respond to potential threats across a company's entire attack surface. By unifying the visibility in a single tool, security operation analysts can focus on one tool set and interface to improve productivity and efficiency. Katie, you talked about bringing in different teams and looking at different information. How useful could a tool like that be when you're trying to bring all that information together to come up with actionable items?
Yeah, I think tooling is one of those things that we should always be thinking about how we can, right? I like what they say about increasing efficiency, scalability, because, right, manually trying to look at a bunch of different log sources in a bunch of spreadsheets, as much as I love me some spreadsheets, is going to take a lot of time, right? You talked about forensics and diving through all these sources. So I think tooling, anything and that can help an analyst bring together a lot of data in one place, whether it's kind of a SEM tool or whatever kind of tool, I think is really important to think about. Whatever can speed up your analysis, right? Because so much of the data gathering is what takes time. If you can speed up the data gathering and normalization, then you can spend more time digging into the fun stuff, which looking for patterns, as we've talked about.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for that answer. And again, thank you to Uptycs for sponsoring this season. For more information on Uptycs and what they're doing, please go check out their website, uptycs.com. That's uptycs.com. So, Katie, now you took all this experience that you've had from working with the government, eventually working with the Mitre team, and now you are at Red Canary as the director of intelligence. Now that is a great title to have, but it also seems like it can be very intimidating. So, what's the day to day like as the director?
Yeah, one of the things I love about my role is that I get to do all kinds of different things. So each of our analysts has a day when we're kind of assigned to look at the different threats that our detection engineers are sending out. So yesterday, I was hands on looking at these detections with my team, and our awesome engineers identified a really concerning Qbot phishing campaign that was then leading to Cobalt Strike and some really scary pre-ransomware stuff. And so like yesterday, I got to be hands on keyboard, like looking at what the threats are doing, which is really fun. And then, right, moving up, I'm not just tactical. I also have a team to manage, right? And that's really fun. Not just managing, but trying to lead and inspire and try to align the people on my team to the things that make them excited and help them grow. So I get to kind of lead and mentor and coach others. I also get to, as a director, right, think strategically, right? Okay, what are the cool things that Red Canary is doing? How can my team inform those? What are the different areas my team should expand into, right? How can we better help customers and the community, right? Learn about threats. And so it's one of the things I love about my job is that I get to do, right, the span of tactical, operational, strategic work. I'm not always just in meetings or thinking about budgets. I'm not always just tactically looking at threats. I get to kind of span that. And that's one of the fun things that I love. But I never want to be completely out of the work. which luckily in my company, right, everyone up to the CEO, our CEO still codes things, right? We all get to have a hand in the work because I would miss that. I still want to see the threats day to day.
It's very refreshing to hear that you and your team, no matter what, I guess, rank you are, still kind of get in the weeds.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, yeah, you can move up in your career, but I think personally, working with the team, or working with the people who you manage, I think it builds morale, and it also keeps you sharp. And it also gives you an opportunity to kind of give that hands-on mentoring and teaching right then and there. I've come across several places where even in a senior role, they'll say, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, I want to go check out what's going on with this pen test. I'm interested in these
Yeah.
API. I'm interested in these APIs and what can happen." And they're like, "What? Like you're an architect." I'm like, "Yeah, that's fine. Sometimes I'd rather be doing that work than, like you said, trying to figure out budgets and vendors and all that other stuff." But shifting gears, you also take all of that experience and your leadership values that you have from your experience, and then with what you're doing as a director, and you're also a teacher or an instructor, and I've seen what you've done at SANS. I see what you've done to help young ladies, or women, to get into like STEM and tech and cybersecurity. And I've always wondered, because I have an idea that I might want to go into teaching myself, but I always feel like, I'm not sure if I'm there yet. And I came across someone who said, the best way to learn about something is to teach it. So is that necessarily true? And is that what led you to start teaching?
Yeah, I think teaching is probably the biggest challenge I've faced in my career thus far, but also the most rewarding. SANS approached me a couple years ago and they were looking for instructors for their cyber threat intel class. And I had spoken at one of their summits and I was kind of like, Robert M. Lee DM'd me on Twitter and I was like, oh my gosh, I was definitely fangirling. And I'm like, who am I to teach this? And, I'm not an expert. And I think we all, right? We all try to be really humble. And we're like, what is an expert? I've had to coach a lot of people on, okay, expert is a range, right? Even if you're an expert, doesn't mean you know everything, right? But after kind of getting over that and having some people encourage me, prepping for the first time that I taught for SANS was a huge amount of work, right? I've been doing cyber threat intel, and I had been at that point for over 10 years. But until you try to teach something to others, like you don't realize that maybe you don't fully understand something. Like something as simple as the Lockheed Martin kill chain, the cyber kill chain. I was like, oh yeah, like no problem. And then I start going through and I'm like, well, what do these phases really mean? And what's the point of using the kill chain? And it was such a challenge, right? It still is a challenge. But what I found is exactly what you said, that once you teach something to others, you have a completely different level of understanding of that topic. And what I love about teaching is that I still improve my understanding. Every single class, a student will ask a question or challenge an idea or something I said in a way that makes me rethink what I believe, what I've assessed. And I love that so much, right? What a great way to like challenge my thinking and challenge myself to keep learning, than to kind of teach what I think to others and then hear their feedback and be challenged on ideas. So teaching, it's a lot, right? I will say that after teaching a 6-day class, I am exhausted. I go take a nap and I like eat popcorn and I tell my husband not to bother me because you give so much of yourself, but it's so rewarding. And I think that, teaching for SANS, like that's kind of a lot, not for everyone, but I think having that teaching mindset, anyone can do, right? It's just about sharing knowledge and realizing that, right, even if you don't know everything, which no one knows everything, sometimes the way you explain something to others in a blog post, a presentation, or just talking to a teammate, maybe the way you explain something helps them learn something new or understand a concept in a way they didn't before. And I think that's what teaching is all about. It's that mindset of wanting to share knowledge and help other people out.
Just to become a SANS instructor is a lot. I've been in communications with them a couple times about possibly teaching, and I think I did the same thing when Steven Sims reached out to me originally, and I'm like, I literally
Who
have
am
his
I? Oh my gosh.
yeah. I'm like,
Be cool, be cool.
I'm like, I literally have his books. Like, I literally
Yeah.
like followed his books when I was coming up, and I'm still following his books. I'm like, and he knows who I am. And then so but yeah, here, just going through that process alone is like, wow, that's a lot. And then you have to go out and teach and then face those challenges that you just mentioned. What is one thing that you try to stress to your students? Like, if there was one thing that you wanted them to walk away with, that could even possibly be more important than the course itself, what is one thing you want them to walk away with when they leave your classes?
I think that one thing that I always try to emphasize, especially towards the end of class, is that I can teach you the topics and you can go through the exercises and you can recite, okay, the definitions of threat or whatever. But the real power in anything that you're learning or that I'm teaching you is when you start to apply it. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges, right? I've had as well as you go to a class and, right, it's awesome and you learn so much. But then sometimes if you don't try to apply it or think through the concepts, you lose it. And that's not as valuable as it could be. So I think what I try to stress to students is that really the class is the beginning, right? I am introducing concepts to you, tools to you, new techniques and methodologies, but then you have to go apply it. And you have to take it back to your day job. Think about, okay, how can I use what I learned to make my team stronger, make our processes better? And so I think that's the biggest thing I would emphasize is right. It's a start of a journey. Anytime you're doing any kind of training or self study, you need to really think about following up and applying what you learned and chewing on those concepts. Right. Some of the concepts we talk about, like clustering with the diamond model and creating threat groups, like that's stuff that it took me many months and years even to think through those concepts. So don't just think of training as an isolated thing. Think of it as a start, and then you have to go apply it to make it useful.
I tell the people who I mentor, you know, it doesn't stop here. It doesn't stop with, reading this book. It doesn't stop with taking this course. It doesn't stop with getting the certification. That's just the beginning. In all honesty, it takes work, and it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of man hours outside of your regular 9 to 5 or whatever your shift is. Too many times talking to people who say they're interested in getting into the field, they think, I did A, so now I should go to B, and game over. I got this, I got a job and I'm fine. I'm like, yeah, okay, so what are you gonna do to keep the job? I compare it to Moore's law. So Moore's law states that, any form of technology usually becomes obsolete within 18 months.
Mm.
So if technology goes obsolete in that short amount of time, then the skills around these technologies probably go obsolete even sooner. So you always need to stay ahead of the advancements of technology. That's the first thing I tell people, and then I say, if that doesn't if that doesn't sound interesting to you, then this probably isn't for you. I probably should find a better way to say that, which leads to my next question. Any tips for people who are interested in teaching and just don't know if they should or where to start?
Yeah, as I mentioned, there are lots of ways to be a teacher. I always recommend a great way to start is within your own team. If you don't have something already like a lunch and learn, right? A lot of security operations centers might have like weekly, just informal training amongst the team. My team does this every 2 weeks where someone who's looked into a topic just shares it with the rest of the team. I think that's a great place to start within your own team, your own company. Other ways to get started, try doing a presentation. It's not for everyone. So if you just want to stay within your own team, that's cool. Doing presentations can be really helpful. And one thing I always encourage people to do is not get intimidated by, oh, someone else has already talked about this topic. A lot of times there's value in you bringing your explanation, your perspective to a topic. So presentations are a great way to get started because if you think about it, when you're presenting, you're really teaching the audience. And so I know smaller venues, B-sides are one of the best opportunities. Your local B-sides is a great place if you want to start trying to do a talk and give that a shot. So I think presentations can be a great way. The other thing, blogging, tweeting, right? Blogs are great, especially personal blogs that no one pays for because you blog as much as you want, right? If you start a blog and you're like, cool, I'm really excited, I'm going to write a post every week, and then you never post again, that's okay, right? But see if that's a way that you like to share. And I think it's not going to be one size fits all, right? The way that I teach might be different than the way you teach, and that's fine. But just trying it, right? Trying different things and seeing kind of what makes you excited, what makes you happy, and how do you enjoy sharing your knowledge. That's what teaching is all about.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of the pandemic, if you want to call it a benefit, uh, is the fact that there are so many ways to communicate now without being face to face. You can do online presentations, Zoom calls, online meetup groups, uh, blogging, like you mentioned, and then YouTube and social media. I've started a YouTube channel, which actually led to this here. But yeah, you there's so many different ways. And then also on top of what you're doing with the teaching, you're also bringing in, like I said, you're doing a lot of work with young women and teaching them about technology. And I think that's amazing for multiple reasons. What's it like to, work with these young people who, like we just talked about, might just be into social media and stuff like that? How do you break that barrier to get them interested and to stay interested?
Yeah, and it's been such an honor for the past couple of years to volunteer for Cyber Jiu-Jitsu Girls Academy, which is a program of the Women's Society of Cyber Jiu-Jitsu. And it has been tougher during the pandemic. We haven't had in person, but hopefully we'll get back up and running soon. But I think it's not just through Cyber Jiu-Jitsu. We tried to reach right middle school, high school aged young ladies, and then I think the real challenge is keeping young women or other folks from different groups, as you said, right? We need everyone. We need a lot of perspectives in this field. Making sure everyone's supported through all of the parts of their career. I think Cyber Jitsu Girls is cool because, right? I think when I was in middle school or high school, like it was just the guys who took. We even had a programming class in my high school, and I was like, oh, like that's not me. I didn't see any other girls doing that, right? And so I think just being there and showing, yes, there are women in cybersecurity. If you like computers, one of the classes before the pandemic, like half the group by the end of the workshops, they all said they wanted to be video game designers, which is really cool. We're like, awesome. That's really hard, but go for it. And I think that it's thinking about helping people along every stage of their career, right? Getting them interested at a young age when a lot of young ladies start to lose interest in science and math and engineering and computers and tech, around middle school. So getting them there. And then, what I've also really enjoyed is naturally throughout my career, women that I've met, that I've worked with, or women who just reach out on Twitter, sometimes will just ask for advice or career thoughts. And, it's always tough sometimes because I'm like, who am I? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm happy to just talk to people and share what's worked for me. But one of the things that I've realized, and right, I would say this about you as well, just being visible, being out there. My team has had a significant increase in the number of female applicants, right? And I think having people who are public, people who are out there in leadership, I think is really helpful to draw new people into the field.
We need to have different trains of thought, and we have to have different people from different backgrounds. And I feel that if we're going to do this right, we have to be the change that we want to see. So, bringing in people who may not look like the norm, that to me, that's my priority, because there are so many people who are doing so many great things. And if you don't, open up your eyes to it, you're going to miss out on some great stuff. One of the things I always say is you have multi-million dollar companies who probably multi-billion dollar companies if they just kind of took off their blinders for a second. I love what you're doing, and if there's any way I can help, please let me know. Like I said, I'm very familiar with the women of cyber jutsu. I do stuff with them a lot outside of work. So again, thank you for that. But in your experience and in everything that you're doing, whether it's teaching, doing the stuff with the director of intelligence and everything, what are some of the challenges that you face with your day-to-day job or with teaching? Like I know you said, it's challenging now to kind of do some of the teaching stuff with the pandemic and things. But yeah, what are some challenges that you face, or some things that you just find difficult?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it at the beginning, balance. I think that's a risk, especially in this industry, but anywhere where you're passionate about something and you love what you do. And I think during the pandemic, everyone working from home, and I think there's an even higher risk of not stopping your workday. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, and I struggle with as well. I love what I do, but that doesn't mean that I should be doing it 24/7, right? So, trying to model good behavior for my team. I try really hard. If I see them on nights and weekends, I'm like, I give them a little eye emoji in Slack, like, hey, do you really need to be doing this at midnight or on Saturday afternoon? Like, go out and live your life. So that's something I struggle with, is a balance. And, there'll be times when I'm super excited. I love what I do and I accept, right? 3 speaking engagements in a month and I'm so pumped up and it's great. And then the night before, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired and I just want to go to bed and I have to do these slides. And that balance, it's a constant struggle. Sometimes I do better with it than others. I probably need to take more vacations. My boss would probably tell me that I need to take more vacations too. So, yeah, to be honest, right, it's a balance of like loving what you do, but keeping below even anywhere close to that burnout line. Because if any of us get to that red line where you're like, oh my gosh, I just can't, like that's terrible for you as a human. It's also terrible for your team and for this industry, right? If we get so overwhelmed and doing so much that we can't operate, right? That's not awesome. So, like anyone, balance, right? Taking time for myself, for my family, to do fun things, even though I love my job, right? That's not the question. It's the balance in life.
Yeah. And to add to that, I'll say, and listen to your body.
Mm.
Your body will tell you
Yeah.
when you're on E. If you don't, eventually your body's going to stop you, and you don't want that to happen. That happened to me. I was so hell bent on, getting the certification and working full time and doing this and still trying to be, a dad. So making all the tennis practices and soccer practices and tennis matches and soccer games, and, still making sure that, my wife sees her husband, a couple times a day. And this is all while working remote. Sometimes a lot of people look at working remote like, oh yeah, great. I get to work in my sweats and I don't have to get dressed. But it's definitely a culture shock, because there are a lot of people who work from home, and whether it's their own, I guess, guilt, you want to call it, or their employer, they feel like, oh, well, since I'm working from home, I should work a few more hours, or I could
Mhm.
work a couple more hours. And next thing you know, like you said, it's 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, or Saturday, or, so yeah, definitely listen to your body and make time for yourself. I
Excellent advice. And
definitely
one
like
thing I've tried to focus on is saying no more.
that.
It's so easy to say yes, but when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else. I heard this at a women's leadership conference a few years ago, and it stuck with me. Like, if I say yes, I can do this presentation. Am I saying no to time with my husband? Am I saying no to sleep time? Am I saying no to coaching and mentoring time with my team? Like, it's always a trade-off. And, I one of the things that I've tried to get into the habit of is, if someone asks me to do a talk and I'm just like, I just feel like I can't, I say, thank you so much for thinking of me. It's going to be a no, as I'm trying to, not over commit. And I have never had someone push back on that. Every single time they're like, totally hear you. Thanks for your consideration. So not being afraid to say no, I think is really important.
Yeah, that balance is super important. I did the same thing a few years ago. I put out a tweet and was like, "Hey, if anybody wants me on their platform," and then I
Whew,
got so many requests, and I think I did like 19 in a stretch of like 3 months.
that's a lot.
And yeah, it was like talk, and then that's what, and then I did a presentation for SANS, and then I had to do another presentation, and then it was like, yeah, after a while, I was like, okay, I'm not doing anything at all. And then it's like, hey, where you been? So
I do the
where'd you
same thing.
go?
It's like in cycles where you're like, oh God, I did too much. I'm just going to like hide under my desk for 2 months, right?
Yeah, definitely. And then also still trying to do your own, like you said, your own blog and your own
Hmm.
podcast. It was a lot. I remember I took a break and I went on vacation
Good.
and last year, and I actually used it as the like build up trailer to the new season of my podcast, because I was getting messages like, where are you, what's happening? And it was like, and it even got to the point where, like, I mean, they were friendly, like they were great people, so I didn't take it personally, but it was almost like threats. It was like, if you don't come back and
You're
and
like, I
and, and
will,
do
just give me
something.
some time. Need some time for myself.
Yeah, so that's definitely important. With all your years of experience and the advancements of attacks, what is one thing you think needs to change?
Interesting. Um, I think one thing that probably needs to change, and this is sort of across our community in general, is automatically dismissing ideas that don't fit our own, or new ideas, or disagreement, or dissent. And this is obviously easier said than done. But, we have our beliefs or our assessments. Okay, here's how I think this adversary might act. And someone might disagree with our assessment. Say, hey, well, have you looked at this other piece of information, right? And this is in cyber threat intelligence or any intelligence. Disagreement. And it takes a lot of maturity. And I often fail at this, to say, okay, someone's disagreeing with me, rather than immediately getting defensive and saying, you have no idea what you're talking about, and attacking them, ad hominem attacks, stopping and thinking, okay, do they have a legitimate point? Right? I think this is how we can improve our analysis of adversaries, but improve as a community as well. Right. And realizing, we talked about the importance of diversity in all forms, people who think differently. And that's particularly important in cyber threat intel, as we're trying to make assessments about what threats are doing, what adversaries are doing. Sometimes listening to that voice who's newer to the field, right, or isn't part of the way that everyone thinks, is really important. So I think listening to dissenting views in a more respectful, productive way would be a big growth area and a big improvement. And as always, I realize that is much easier said than done. But setting aside the ego a little bit, stopping, taking a deep breath. Okay, they're not attacking me. They're questioning my idea, and trying to kind of give that credence and respect, I think would be a good step forward.
I agree. When I put up a blog post, or I put up a post on Twitter or something, and someone responds, I actually read it 5 times. I tell myself,
It's good.
because the first time you read it, you're gonna go, "What the?"
Yeah.
And
Attacking my
yeah,
idea. Yeah.
right. And then so I make sure I read it, because sometimes things get lost in translation with text. That's why I actually don't
Especially
like.
on Twitter.
Yes, I don't like text messages, or Twitter
Mm-mm.
messages like that, because I might be reading it in a more aggressive tone than the person who intended. So like I said, I'll read it about 4 or 5 times, and then I start to ask myself, okay, based on what you read, do you think they're attacking you, or are they attacking your idea? Sometimes you can't answer that question with just one, with that's that one post. So I'll even invite people to elaborate, and then after 2 or 3 responses, I'll go, oh no, okay, no, you definitely just don't like me. Got it. Okay.
You're just a troll,
Yeah,
versus you have a point here
yeah,
that
it's
I've
like,
tried to listen to.
yeah, and it's kind of like, everybody has an opinion, especially on social media, and you have to tell yourself that you don't not the nasty attacks, not the threats, not the racist or the bigoted or the sexist or whatever attacks. You don't No one deserves those things. But when you sign up for social media, you're signing up for, like you said, difference of opinion. As long as the opinion is respectful and they're not attacking you personally, you shouldn't write them off. Like you said, it could be a perspective that you didn't see. It's a fresh set of eyes. I think that's super important. I think that's gotten lost with everybody. That's one of the things that I think got lost with everybody kind of working from home and being in their own bubbles and their own silos, is that we've lost that ability to effectively communicate. So yeah, I think definitely need to get back to that, especially in our field, because if not, we're going to run into a whole lot of problems.
Agreed.
If you were someone to call you in, let's say it's a company, they didn't have a big budget, but they want to take security seriously, they want to defend their stuff. What is something that you would recommend that's maybe not necessarily an expensive solution, but a solution nonetheless that could be a quick win?
It's boring, but asset inventory. Figure out what is on your network to start with. And of course, as always, these things are so easy to say. Yeah, just go out and like map everything on your network. That's a huge, huge challenge. But if you have a couple people who are really dedicated, maybe you buy a tool, maybe you don't, to help you do that. I think that's one of the things that everyone says it over and over. It is basic, but it is not easy or simple to do. But I think, right, starting with that basis of what do you have in your organization you're trying to protect is a really good starting point.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw me just like going to church here when you said it. But it was, I agree wholeheartedly. One of the things that with the team, with the company I work at, is we empower each other to do these things. So, if we're not necessarily on an assessment, or there's no fire to put out at the moment, we tell our team members, go out and look. Right? Go scan the stuff. Obviously, don't test in production. We don't want to do that.
No one
But
ever tests in prod. Never.
yeah, that's a whole show in itself there. That's a different conversation. The nightmares of testing. You want to go take a look at these S3 buckets and make sure they're configured properly? Go ahead. API inventory. That's become my niche spot over the years, is with API testing. I think that's super important. Inventory all the APIs you have. Make sure that we're not using any deprecated versions or old versions, because these are all gateways to bigger problems. And like you said, it's not a fun task. No one wants to actually have to sit here and look at all old Swagger files or or API Connect files, but you usually come back with some very useful information. Either A, you can go back to your director and say, "Look, we're actually clean. I found nothing," or B, here's what we found. This led to this, because once you open one door, it always leads to another. So um, I think that's important, empowering your team and encouraging them to go out there and find these things, and then also positive reinforcement. It could be in the form of recognition on the public email or Slack or Discord or whatever it is. Can be a raise or a little bonus, whatever it is, but also incentivize them in a way that shows we appreciate what you do, because a lot of people just look at work like a 9 to 5. So it's like, I'm not gonna do any extra work if that I don't get paid for. That you have that mentality as well. So if you incentivize it, I think, or do some type of positive reinforcement, I think that would also encourage people to take that extra step too. What would you recommend to a new blue teamer first day on the job?
Ask questions. Just ask questions. This, again, it can be such a tough thing, especially when you're new, because you don't want to seem like you don't know what you're talking about. But question asking and asking good questions, I think, is one of the most important skill sets for anyone, whether you're new or not. But people will generally, teams have training plans. Okay, the new person learns this, but I found sometimes it's tough for experienced people to know what others don't know. right? It's something that they've been doing for years. It's a routine, it's a process, a tool. And they're like, oh, of course, everyone else thinks like me and knows what I know. So anytime you don't understand or you have a question, right, raising your hand and saying, hey, what about this? I don't understand what you did there. I recently talked to someone in our organization who's helping with continuous improvement. And she started the conversation saying, I don't do cybersecurity. And so, right, my questions might seem kind of silly. And then she started asking the best questions like, how do analysts identify new threat groups? And I was like, you have no idea how good of a question that is. And so, right, it is so tough because no one wants to seem dumb when they start a new role, but being bold and asking questions, because in getting your questions answered, that's how you learn.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what you were saying about, putting egos to the side and getting that fresh perspective.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a dumb question, unless, no, I'm not going to say that. But yeah, there's no such thing as there's no such thing as a dumb question, especially if you're new in the field.
Yeah.
I think you should be a sponge. Um, I tell my mentees all the time, okay, don't get overwhelmed. You're gonna get overwhelmed anyway, even though I'm telling you not to get overwhelmed. But go in there and be a sponge.
Yeah.
Literally be a child in a toy store. Like, what's this do? What's that? Why?
Yep.
And then what? And yeah, you might come across some people who that rubs the wrong way, but for the most part, you're gonna be met with people who are actually happy to see that you're willing to ask these questions and learn. And then the second part to that is, don't just ask the questions and go, okay, yeah, thanks for the answer. Now see how you can, use that and take action. You know, you and say, hey, I took this based on the advice that you gave. This is what I came up with. Am I on the right track? And you'll be surprised at the feedback you'll get from supervisors or whoever's in charge, that they see someone is willing to take this and ask these questions and have this follow up. And it makes you a better professional as well, because now you know what to look for, the questions to ask. You're empowered to ask more questions, because like you said, you have people and you're like, that is an amazing question. Now they actually feel, they don't feel so dumb. They don't feel like, oh, should I ask? Now they know, okay, she likes when I ask these questions.
It's
So
great. Yep.
yeah, that's
And if anyone ever makes you feel stupid for asking a question, like just ignore it. Like move on, find another person because that's just unnecessary.
yep.
It
Yep.
happens, but just move on.
Yeah.
Ignore the haters and find the good people who care about answering your questions, helping you grow. Because there are a lot of us out there.
Please, yeah, go back to the Twitter conversation from earlier and take that advice. Are there any misconceptions about blue teaming, DFIR, threat intelligence, that maybe other people in the industry or even the general public have, that you wish you could correct?
I think one potential misconception is that defense is all one thing. And that someone who does network defense, blue teaming, whatever you call it, knows every piece of that. It's just like cybersecurity, right? Or information security. There are so many different roles. And even within blue teaming or digital forensics, there are so many subspecialties. And so realizing that, right, if you are in defense, if you're in blue teaming, the blue side, you're still going to be learning within that realm, right? Cyber threat intelligence and tracking adversaries, even within that field, right? I don't know everything about every type of adversary, right? Some people are experts on certain regions of the world or using certain sources, right? I'm not a dark web intel analyst. Some people are excellent at that. And so just remembering that, yeah, we kind of bucket these areas of cybersecurity into blue or red or defer, but within that, there's so many different specialties, and that's what's sort of cool about this field in general and blue team is that, all right, you start in one area, you learn that, and maybe you find you like it or you don't. Cool, move on to another area. So the fact that it's vast and there's so much to do, so many subspecialties and so much to learn.
Awesome. So with that, I'm going to wrap the show. So I want to thank you again, Katie, for joining. please tell the people how to find you.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Like the Coins. Also on LinkedIn, at Katie Nickles. I'm not as great on LinkedIn though. It's hard to keep up with multiple social media platforms, so Twitter is usually the best place to find me. And yeah, this has been a really fun conversation. So I'd love to hear from others who are watching and make new connections in this community.
Yes, I definitely will, and we will definitely be in contact for for other conversations like this. Again, super thankful that you took some time out from your busy schedule to have this conversation and also be a part of this team. So, everybody watching, thank you. This has been another episode of Hacker Valley Blue. The defenders, like I said before, my team is growing. I'm super happy and super excited to present that final product and show you some really great people in this field. So thank you again to Ron and Chris for the opportunity. Thank you to Upticks for sponsoring this episode and in this season. And thank you to everyone watching and listening or getting this information from whatever platform you're doing. Until then, I will see you next time. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Hacker Valley Blue. If you did, please remember to like it, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends and colleagues and family members, get it all out there, and make sure you tune in for the next episode. Also remember to join our Discord server and you can talk to me and some of the other Hacker Valley family. So make sure you go check us out over there too.